Thanks for coming, first of all. So on a Sunday morning, I know it's quite hard, so yeah.
So just starting off, before we speak about anything else or go into the talk, we'd just like to say what Untold is. I'm guessing some of you may know, some of you may not know, some of you might have checked out the website, whatever permutation combinations. So Untold started off as a very, as a result of a desire, a very personal desire for a bunch of us to explore and to know more and to understand more about the world we live in and meet the kind of people, interesting people around the world, right? Although we've started with India right now because it's the most accessible and it's basically the whole world is here. You can find unlimited stories. So we started there and hopefully the idea is to take it to a lot more places through collaborations and through working together with people like you and creative communities across the world. Starting with the theme as such, when we heard this theme, shock, it was a bit, we were wondering what is so, we asked the question ourselves, what is so shocking about or what is so surprising about what we do? And then I think the most important thing, the surprising is like we go through that process every time we're in the story, we're doing the story on the field itself. You know, we go with certain kind of assumptions and then we are broken down into pieces with either with the story or the people we meet on the road or the places that we see, right? That's very important. And that's a huge part of the process, so it kind of makes sense to talk about that surprising element in this stories, whether the stories we tell or the stories that we experience on the road.
And the shocking part was that we wanted to be storytellers from the get-go, but it took us like 8 years, 6 years, 7 years to finally get there after a tryst with everything from finance to journalism to everything. So that was the shock part. But also what makes for a story? I mean, you know, there is, right now everything can be considered a story, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of people saying that this is like sort of an untold story itself. People come and, you know, publish how-to lists and listicles and, you know, go here, go there, whatever. I mean, a lot of travelogues claim to be storytellers. I mean, there are a lot of definitions of a story. So we want to address what makes a story, right? What makes for a story? What's the premise of a story? How should be compelling enough, or what is it that comprises of a story, right?
So I was browsing through the internet while I was trying to research for this, answer, and this is exactly what I found. These are the actual titles of stories out there. Like my favorite one is 8 Men Who Will Get You Pregnant Without Touching You. That's actually called a story online right now. And there's just pictures of 8 men, like good-looking men, and that's it. That's the story, and that's what they call this word. Like it's such a trivial thing, but it's really interesting to see the kind of trends that we are going into in terms of internet. Every day there are new sites launching. Every day there are new websites and magazines launching because it's so easy and it's good. It's fantastic that the publishing power has come to everybody, but also in that kind of rut. 90% of what we consume is just unnecessary, and it's the time. It just drains our brains out. You know, like it's not just time to it's not time to just stop, but it's I think time to rethink of what fulfills our desire to story and content and writing, etc. Whatever. If I'm spending some time on the internet, I need to take some value out of it. That's very important for us as Untold as well, because if there are millions of sites out there, and if you're on Untold's website, it's a matter of respect to the audience that he's investing time in our website to read. So it better be good. You know, it better be something that or the person takes out of something, whether inspired or moved or something. You know, it has to be of some value to somebody who's on the site. That's essentially what we think is a story. Now we'll obviously get into how we go about it and what we do and how we do it. Okay, so the guy who founded, was the community manager of Berlin Art Parasites, now has started his own page called Antidote. You guys should check it out. It's much better than Berlin Art Parasites. I was reading his interview and I really love his work, and he's from Mexico. His story itself is pretty incredible. Somebody asked him in the interview, what goes on in your mind when you post these poetry or this art? And the answers he said was something really resonated with us and how we look at Untold and how we look at the stories that we do. Will they feel the same thing I'm feeling right now with the story? That's very important. Like, how do we convey that? Does it require great visuals? Does it require great words? Does it require video? Whatever. How should it be presented? How should it be told? I'm hoping the story makes someone's day. That's basically it, right? So you will not find critical reports of politics or corruption on Untold, because I don't think we have any specialization in that.
And there's a space for that. So
there's a space for that. Everybody has their thing. So I hope it makes my day, not just the reader, but also the writer's day. I wish we can do justice to the kind of story there is. These are incredible stories. These are not stories of celebrities or your A-grade actors, but these are stories that need to be heard and told. And the story deserves exposure. It really deserves to be told, and because these are incredible experiences of people, of places that inspire and move not just us but everybody who reads it. And more than anything else, I think it's really important to have that conversation about this kind of story. Whether it's positive, negative, whether you like what we've written or don't like, it's really important to have that conversation.
Yeah, and also it comes down to that moment when we travel, and I'm sure all of you have come across this moment where you meet someone, they say something, or you have an experience, and you look at that moment and you say, okay, wow, this is incredible. Did you look around and say, did you guys hear that? Did you guys see that? Right? And you want to share that experience, share that moment with everyone around you. And when we write or take a photograph or make a video, we want to sort of share that same experience of how we consume that moment. And it's as simple as that for us. Like when we see something that really compels us, we want to write it, or we take our time with our stories. It's a mess. There are so many versions of our stories in terms of edits. But in the end of it, we want to be really proud of it. Like the moment we were there in front of the character, in front of that experience, in front of that story, and we felt so compelled to write about it or to share it with an audience. So if we can translate that into words and photographs, that's what we want to do. And like he said, like the point said, it said to have a conversation about it. So we just don't want our stories to be glimpses. We don't want our stories to be something you just sort of scroll through. We want you guys to think about it. We want you guys to say, okay, wow, this happens in India. There's people like this. There are moments like this. There are arts and crafts and history like this. So we want you to be compelled enough to have a conversation in forums such as these. So that's what you want to do, basically.
And clogging is something really important, and it has to be, for us, whatever stories we do, I think it has to be straight from the heart. And I'm sure Naveed and the rest of the team will agree to it as well. By the way, I forgot to tell you that we're just two of us. It's not all our work. There's a good 8 to 10 of us who do this work, and right now we're the only two people in the city. Everybody else is traveling, so we thought it'll be nice to have a conversation with you guys. Coming back to the point, unclogging is really important. I think we need to take all the bullshit away from both internet and what we consume to really see the story. And it's the same thing when we travel as well. The moment we ask somebody is the story, oh, that tourist destination, oh, the Mysore Palace is really nice. Do you want to write a story about it? Like we always get that. Or Naveed always has an experience of they always tell him ghost stories for some reason.
Yeah, the most fascinating ghost stories. I've had the most brilliant ghost stories. We went to Meghalaya once, and they said that this is ghost, which basically takes trekkers. It's a ghost which only haunts hikers and trekkers, right? And they take these trekkers and hikers and they put them on a branch of a tree for 3 days. There's no reason, there's no rhyme or whatever it is. It's just they take this trekker with his backpack, I'm guessing, and they put him on a branch of a tree for 3 days. And then he comes back, and that's it. He comes and he says, the people are, where were you? And he's like, I was on a branch of a tree. And nobody believes him, of course, because who does that, right? So that's the ghost story from Meghalaya. So the first thing we get, like he said, everywhere we go is ghost stories. So Untold, wow, okay, I have a ghost story for you. And it's across the country. It's fascinating, and I'm sure we'll do a piece about that soon. But it's what we get at first. And another thing, we are from an advertising background, so this whole talk is going to have unclog and whatever because of the Untold thing. We think it's clever, but I'm pretty sure it's not. But yeah.
We try to make it look pretty because it was not clever, so
Yeah.
I hope you like it. A lot of people ask us, how do you decide that this story needs to be told and this story does not? Frankly, the only answer is that it has to, if we feel it, we know that our audience will feel it, right? We know that the photographers will feel it, and we know that the writers will feel it, or the videographers will feel it, right? So that's essentially the filter. That's the main filter, actually. So when people ask, oh, what is this filter? Do you look at TRPs? Do you look at that? We don't know. I don't even know the full form of TRP to start with.
Lies.
I don't. So anyway, just to give you examples, so every section will take you through examples through the stories we've done. So it kind of shows you exactly what we're talking about. The first one is this, Naveed.
Okay, so the whole idea of unclog is to take away the bullshit. It's a great story. It's by this writer called Bhavita, who's in Manipur right now traveling. Cutting a long story short, it's a story about a golden disc. So when the Voyager satellite from the NASA was sent in 1969, 1970 into space. So they made a golden record of sounds of the earth, like the sounds of waves, sounds of first kiss, sounds of trees, sounds of everything, right? It was fascinating. So in that golden record, it was just a glimpse of the earth sent to space. There was no idea that someone's going to find it, nothing like that. It was just sent into space to give a glimpse of the planet. And in that golden record, there's one Indian voice. There's one Indian voice. It's a classical singer called Kesarbai Karkare. And it's a beautiful song called Jaat Kaha Ho. It's as good as the Interstellar record, I think. It's really beautiful. I think you guys should check it out. Just the song, the story, everything. So this story is not so completely untold. I mean, there are some people who have addressed the story. Like I know mainstream journalists who have done the story, but they've taken a complete different spin on it. Like the story is so compelling, but what they've done is they have gone into her personal life, they've gone into her affairs, they've gone into what she's done in her personal time, what she's done wrong, mistakes, missteps, everything. So basically scandalized her entire character. And because of this, the entire family has shut down from any sort of exposure. So they don't really, so when we reached out to them, it was quite a process to just gain their trust, for them to tell their story to us, right? So it took us a while to break that barrier, but we realized that there's a far more compelling story to be told of this voice which is literally billions of miles away, which crossed the solar system 3 years ago, arguably, apparently. But it crossed 3 years ago, and just imagine that for a second, right? There's a voice, an Indian voice, a classical song, beautiful song, in space right now. I mean, I don't think there's much more compelling than that. And that's all you need to tell, actually, and we wanted to tell that story. She's no more, unfortunately, but we used her granddaughter as a protagonist. A granddaughter was very proud of her grandmom. And we went personal with the story, but in a very different sense. We had pride as our filter, and we told the story like it should be told. Like imagine The Martian being about Matt Damon's first date. That was the parallel that the others drew, but we knew there was a compelling story. And there's no need for bullshit here. I mean, I'm sure in terms of journalistic, we've been journalists too, so, I mean, sort of. But, we've tried to carve out stories, whatever, but when there's something so compelling, there's no need for it. And for guys who haven't read the story and heard the song, I absolutely suggest you do, not because it's from Untold and all of that. But it's a great, she's an amazing artist. And yeah, so that's the story. And that's the idea of unclogging for us. We don't want to try say something that's not relevant. We want to say something that's more compelling than what it is. I'm sure this story would compel you more than the other ones.
Just adding to that, I mean, it was untold in a way that, I mean, people did know about her music and her songs and stuff in the more niche circles of Hindustani music and everything. But when we knocked on her doors of the family did not actually know that her song was selected to be part of the Golden Disc. They had no idea. So we had to actually tell them that this is what it is. And then we had to first educate them about the story and then get her great-grandniece to actually play the production. And it's really funny because she looks exactly like Kesarbai Karkar. And it was really nice because it kind of showed how she looked when she was younger. So we did a nice photo shoot of her, of her practicing and things like that. So it's It's a beautiful, so when you look at it at a journalistic lens, it doesn't tick any of the boxes of a journalistic piece, right? Apart from that being true and apart from that being fact, right? But we went for it in a way that if I had to write a book or if I had to write a story about this, how would I do it? And that's essentially what happened. This is a tribe called the Halaki Wakaligas in Karnataka, northern Karnataka, specifically in the Ankola and the western Ghats, the coastal belt region. So when we found out about them, there was when I read online about whatever was written. Now they are not untold, by the way. So they have been covered quite extensively, and people know about them, especially from people from those regions are very well versed about that culture. But when I read about it, there was something there that I said, okay, I think we should go and see what's happening. It was always about, okay, they're from SCST, they're economically backward, basically everything that you read about every tribe in the world. It's the same thing, right? But I felt like, they had a lot of character in them. Something about them drew them to me. So Madhu is the photographer who took this beautiful picture. So we went there and basically we met with a whole bunch of people. We met the tribe, we met a bunch of them. No, they're not really living in the forest or anything. They're pretty much in the city, but they still choose to practice a lot of their culture. Only the older people, older women. But in that untold story, we found another untold story. There was this a group of 4 women who've been singing songs. They're very sing-songy kind of culture, Like, you'll be talking to them and like before they'll start singing a song about how beautiful your hair is. And not my hair, but Madhu's. But you'll have to actually wait for 5 minutes for them to complete the song, to continue a conversation. It's like a musical movie, It was beautiful. It was what an experience there was, And so we thought, that's what we wanted to cover, We wanted to cover their talent of poetry and music and songs and just living their life through just singing. It's incredible. So we took that angle. We recorded their songs. We put out a SoundCloud link on our website, and we took these beautiful photographs of them in their favorite beach, We asked them to dress up, in a way that they would like to be shown. They always dress up like this, but that's actually 4 more layers of beads than they usually wear because they were very excited about the photo shoot. And this is the daughter of one of the lead singers of that group, granddaughter, I think. Granddaughter. And she actually, it's really interesting because she was part of the story in a very interesting way. She was very shy of just wearing those clothes or wearing those beads because she felt it was very, it was not, cool. That she really felt that, and I could see that she was hiding. She wore a coat before the shoot. She went into the auto before we could take the picture, and it was really disheartening in a way because she should be proud. What are we teaching our children if they're not proud of their own identities and their roots? And schools are kind of uneducating them out of these cultures. You don't have to be a tribal person, but you need to at least embrace your culture, embrace your roots, because it's beautiful. So that's the angle we took, and the whole story is that way. So if you can read it and if you want to let us know what you think of it, it's an interesting piece. Even when I wrote it, it was I wanted to know if this was the right thing I was doing, because I did not choose to write about any of their problems. I did not choose to write about their economic issues or social issues. I chose to write about what's really amazing about them. Right? A lot of people have asked this question, do you know that they're also economically backward? But yes, that story has been covered for I don't know how long, but do you know about this?
No, and that's the interesting part. After he wrote the story, I think a lot of people have come and wanted to know more and wanted to help even. So it's a strange sort of activism that's sort of come into play, which we unintended, but it happened. And that was something they were compelled enough to know more and help them if they needed help. Unexpected, again, sorry. But our journeys have no destination really. I mean, the stories that we have found are pretty much in plain sight. There are a lot of stories that people think that we've gone far off places. Yeah, we have done that. We have gone to places that few people have gone before. I mean, in Himalayas in winter, for example. But there are a lot of the times that it's right in plain sight. I'm sure if I see you guys, it's become like an instinctive thing. So instead of saying how are you or what do you do, I almost go and say, okay, so what has surprised you last? Almost instinctively. And then they ask me, who the hell are you? So our conversations usually start off that way. And it's sort of become instinctive that we're always looking for stories. And I'm sure that, the 30, 40 of you guys here all have some sort of experience, some sort of story that we can pick off and claim that we discovered it. No, I'm serious, I'm kidding. But, I'm sure there's a story here. I'm sure you guys have experienced something that's compelled you, that's relatively unknown or untold, of characters, of experiences, of traditions, legacies, histories, anything. It could be anything, and I'm sure you guys have seen something on the road, or even right here, or maybe on Church Street, We were in Blossoms the other day, and we saw a letter found addressed to someone in Langford Town, and we went and pursued them, and we gave them a letter, and they were like, okay, this is a letter he wrote 60 years ago or something. Her grandfather wrote 60 years ago. And the story is everywhere. I mean, the story is down this road. So it's quite exciting. So there's no destination, there's no journey. We are here right now, but we're still looking for stories. We're still looking for stories in Bangalore. We're still looking for stories in Koramangala, in traffic. There could be a story somewhere there. I mean, I'm sure someone's reading the same book I'm reading. I'm going to look around. It's sort of freaky. I might stalk all of you guys. But there's a story there somewhere. And that's what we want to say. It's unexpected. Where we see it, it's unexpected. And when we sort of define what we do, and then people get really excited, and then there's stories all over the place. They come into this story, ghost story, this story, right? So it's all there. And so that's basically the premise of unexpected.
Yeah, again, the lack of destination in our stories also reflect in the website and the way we do stories. There, we really consciously did not put genres to the website, right? Okay, food, culture, music, hipsters, etc., etc. So we didn't do that. We thought, okay, if it's an untold story, we will tell it, no matter what. If it's food, if it's about somebody, if it's about a tribe, or it's about a personal story about untold, we'll do all of it, right? Because we're just greedy like that. That's essentially what was the premise of it. So just, a couple of examples of unexpected destination. This is a story that Naveed did, so he'll tell you about.
Yeah, another thing is, like he said, when we're doing the website, I'm sure you guys will be interested to know that, we wanted to know what we wanted to be. We look at other similar portals, similar storytelling portals, and they all had a fashion, they had a food, they had a culture, and we wondered as to where we fit in. We thought maybe culture, maybe history to an extent, maybe, current affairs. But at the same time, we realized that we don't really have an audience per se. We don't have a certain set audience. Like we're from advertising, so we look at we're talking to only this guy, right? We're only talking to this girl or this age group or this guy who eats cornflakes or whatever, right? But we sort of broke that away. We sort of broke all of that, and we said, okay, we want to tell stories that could compel anyone. So this is a story called Somewhere in Meghalaya. I hope, not sure if you've read it, but it's essentially we went to Meghalaya. We didn't have any leads. There's not much written about the Northeast, unfortunately. It's an amazing place. So we went there, and we went to Cherrapunji, and anyone who's been to Cherrapunji knows that it's a plateau, and there's a lot of villages all around in its depths of its jungles. So we went to the famous root bridges. You guys, some of you must have been there, I'm sure. So these root bridges, we went there and we sort of assumed that, okay, the villages around it will know something about it. There must be some tradition, some legacy, something. So we went there and we stayed in his house for a couple of days. And we were like wondering, we just asked him, do you know any untold stories? Do you know any, it's a very, very vague question. People usually don't know what to answer. They just sort of ignore us usually. And he just took that book, that notebook, and he came to us and he said, everything you need to know is here. And we were a little surprised. We were like, what does that mean? I mean, what do you mean? It's a notebook and it's all handwritten text. So we later realized that Meghalaya is a matriarchal society. So he was from a different village. He moved into this village when he got married. And he was so fascinated by the root bridges and all of the culture around there that he went around for around 20, 25 years talking to all of the elders across the villages, across Cherrapunji. And whatever he knows, legends, poetry, history of the place, is all in that book. You will not find all of that content anywhere else. A lot of it is oral history. You will not find it anywhere else but in that handwritten book. That's the last living slice of history. That's very personal to him, that he's written objectively. There's no like, oh, this tribe sucks, this tribe is not that great. None of that. He's sort of like modern day historians, but he's just objectively written what he's heard. And it's he's got drawings, it's got, references, it's got names. It's a beautiful book. And if you guys ever go to Meghalaya or Cherrapunji, let us know. We will love for you guys to stay with him And incidentally, it's really funny because everything he owns, most of the things he owns is stuff left behind by travelers. Like, the funky looking Hawaiian shirt is from a traveler. We gave him an oversized jacket because it was going to rain there very soon. But yeah, the only thing he really owns and really belongs to him is that book. And that's all he wants, that's all he needs, and he keeps going every now and then. Anyone who comes from another village, he wants to ask them about it. He asked us if we know something. I mean, that was sort of interest. We came from Bangalore and we had no idea. I mean, like, road bridges, we took 3-4 photos, and he asked us, do you know anything about this place? Like, curiously, because if we knew, he could write in his book, right? Because he was that intensive in his research, and he became a story in itself. And we don't want to give you the specific location that we call it somewhere in Meghalaya, because he wanted only the people who really wanted to know to come to him, rather than just put it out there and then we have everyone just sort of getting a glimpse and saying great and just moving on. He wanted people to come there and actually contribute to the atmosphere, to the history of the place, to help him clean up the place even, So that's why we said somewhere in Meghalaya according to his wishes. One of the travelers, incidentally, was so impressed by him, they put him on TripAdvisor. He spent 3 months trying to get TripAdvisor to remove his profile from TripAdvisor. Right? He called Singapore. He went all the way to another town for a phone. There's no connectivity there. And he went to a phone, called Singapore, called whoever it is, and told them to please respectfully put his name and his place down from TripAdvisor. That's the sort of commitment he has to his cause. He doesn't want to just publicize it. He doesn't want to do it for any other reason, but very personal. So he knows that if we tell someone, and if you guys are compelled by the story, you guys will go there and not just to click a photo of him, or to experience his hospitality, but to actually help him make a difference.
So just another thing is unearth is something that's really important to Untold. Is we need to look beyond the surface. We all have been tourists at some point, then we moved on to becoming travelers. It's a necessary journey, it's an essential journey that we all go through. We go to tourist places, we're like, okay, that's cool. This is a palace that was there for 500 years, and this is a royal family that used to kill thousands of elephants, celebrate them. But what beyond? What about the common people during that empire? What about the people who are making these chairs, who are making these art into these beautiful palaces? That's where we are interested. We're not interested in the larger glory. When we travel, it's not really about telling a story. We're not intending to tell a story. We are intending to understand. We're intending to know that story. That's what I think makes a bit of a difference from how we approach to the rest of the people out there.
And this part of the process is the most exciting part for us. It is the most exciting part because a lot of the times we find stories, people tell us stories that they don't even think is stories. They're not important. Like again, Meghalaya is another example. We were walking and we were looking for stories, and for 3-4 days, we weren't finding anything but ghost stories and crazy stories about hornbills. I mean, I can tell you guys personally, it's just mad about a son hitting a hornbill and stuff like that. And then we were just passing by and the guy said, I asked him what's that river called? There was a river there and he said, what's that river called? And he said some name, Sockme. He said, River Sockme. It's nothing happens there, they just auction the river every year. I'm like, what? They auction a river? I mean, we were just so shocked. We were like, what did you just say? Can you repeat that please? And he said, yeah, they just auction it, fishermen auction it, they protect the river. No big deal, it's fine, let's move on, I'll show you my house. A lot of the times this is what happens. There are so many stories that they tell us and they don't even think it's important enough for us. The people, another story was that we found a temple that could be dismantled, right? So he was more interested about malls in Bangalore than the temple that can be dismantled 1,000 years ago. It was built 1,000 years ago and he's like, okay, tell me, forget the temple, is 3 floors or 4 floors? In your malls. I mean, how do you go up? Tell me more, show me pictures, stuff like that. And this is the more exciting part because a lot of them don't even know what they have around them. And when we tell them and we show them, and when we sort of tell them how important it is to us or to people back in Bangalore or people back in Bombay or Delhi or wherever mainstream India, if you can call it that, they are really excited and they're almost surprised and shocked. They're shocked about it. They say, okay, wow, this is important. Is this a story? Is this compelling to you? And it pushes them to do what they do. It pushes them to be who they are more than, like the Halaki story, the youngest girl, like he said, wants to be cool. But hopefully this story changes that perception for her as well, to sort of keep her roots and sort of celebrate them.
It actually has, because that photo, for some reason, she's not even the singing Halaki, by the way. She doesn't sing at all. That photo somehow has clicked a lot, and it's been around so everywhere. It's been on papers, people have picked it up, it's on blogs, etc. So I actually sent word to one of the guides with the screenshots of how people are talking about it, and they showed it to her, and she was so happy. She was, for the first time probably, she felt that, okay, there's something interesting that I'm part of, and that's the most heartening experience actually. I was in Kashmir just a couple of weeks ago before I broke my knee. So the bunch of stories we did in Kashmir was very interesting, because Kashmir can be a very intense place, apart from it being very beautiful. There was one thing that the kids of Kashmir did, something called the Hagur. Right, Hagur is basically 4 pieces of logs of wood, like sticks of wood, attached to 3 ball bearings, and they just like literally bodyboard down the hills, right? And they use that also to ferry wood and rice and paddy fields, and it was so common to them. And it was like, okay, that's not even something interesting? And I found that incredibly ingenious, in that place where they don't have money or anything. They're making bodyboards, and like various different kind of bodyboards. And we went after that story, and in the entire village there was just one kid who was gifted by his brother in his free time, who was using it. Now they have those scooters and cycles and plastic ones that we all grew up with. And we really wanted to do that story, so we took him to a hillside, we made him bodyboard, and there were a lot of kids who came in and who were so excited that somebody from outside is actually interested in something so small. And the most interesting part was when we went back next day, there were 3 more Hagurs, because children had made them, so something that they had ditched their plastic carts, the plastic cycles, and they had made more Hagurs. That was amazing. I think I felt like there was some meaning to what we do, apart from just documenting things. That's the kind of domino effect that is interesting. That's the most exciting part of the journey.
Okay, so this is a story which got pretty popular because everyone drinks chai. Everyone wants to know where this Irani chai comes from. And that was where it is inspired from. So one of our colleagues, one of the writer, Rishabh, he drinks chai a lot, and he just wondered one day, where's this coming from? Where did this come from originally, right? So he took the trip to Bombay, and he spent a lot of times in Irani chai cafes, which seems like a beautiful vacation in my head. And he did that for days, and he talked to all of these people who, you can go to a place like Irani Chai Cafe and actually talk to them, and they're full of stories, right? They're full of stories about these amazing journey through Persia, through modern day Iran, and the way they came here, and what India is, what India means to them. And it's really relevant story as well, considering the modern day refugee crisis, and about how everyone's moving and everyone is not being accepted in European countries, and there's a lot of, are they terrorists, are they whatever, there's a lot of stereotyping going on. So this is a really interesting story, especially for us, because when they came over to India and we accepted them for who they are, and we allowed them to do what they do, and it's become part of the Indian culture, it's become part of who we are as well. I mean, I can't imagine India without Irani chai, right? So, and Rishabh went there, he found out these stories, and a lot of it was history. So he actually, another illustrator called Anuj, we illustrated the entire journey from Iran to here and its relevance. And to unearth such an important journey in such a modern day important context was, heartening for us. And it was exciting for us. When everyone's talking about the Syrian crisis and everything, we said, okay, we can learn from history itself. We don't have to look further than Bombay or a town or whatever. The next time you go to town, you can just sort of imagine people streaming in because they've been oppressed in another land, and all they did was make chai, right? So that was the really interesting part. This was another story which I was telling you about just a few moments ago, about the the temple that could be dismantled, right? So I found out about the story from a friend's friend, yeah, or another friend maybe. So one of these guys was a hardcore trekker. He was a hiker who goes all over Western Ghats. And he said there's a small town called Mulher near Gujarat and Maharashtra border. And he said that there's a family there which takes care of the Shivaji fort, Mulher fort, which is one of the most bloodiest forts, because that was the point where the Mughals and the Shivaji's army would often collide and fight, right? So that was the brink. So we went in search of this family. We took 2-3 days off from Bombay. It's around a couple of days. We went there, and this family hasn't gone to the fort in 14 years. It's right above them. There's the family. The house is there, and right, you can see from their window, you can see the fort on top of a hill. And the original story was that this family takes care of the fort. And I thought it was very interesting because nowadays you look at our forts and it's all over the place, right? It's not being taken care of. I mean, most forts aren't. So I thought it was an interesting story of seeing how a family takes care of a fort personally. But when I went there, I found out that the family hasn't been to the fort in 14 years because it's much of a climb. He said, it's too much of a climb. I can't climb so much, So we were really disappointed. He said, okay, we're going to come back now. But then he said, okay, are you going to go to the fort? I was like, yeah, sure. We came so far, so we might as well go to the fort and see what it is. He said, there's a temple in the middle. Again, no big deal. It's just a temple that you can dismantle and put back together. And we're like, what? What temple is it? We thought it was some sort of, Ganesh Puja thing that they put together and they can, remove it in time. But we realized it's a 1,000-year-old temple. It's a 1,000-year-old temple that was built that could be completely dismantled and put back together and moved to another place and put back together. And they did this because back then the cultural capitals kept changing. And you had to be near the cultural capital to, have benefit from them. So their idea was that the cultural capital changed, or if war happened, they could move their entire temple. So we went to the temple and we were in disbelief. I mean, no way you can move. It's like this. If you can say that you're going to move this premise completely and shift it somewhere else, I mean, it looks like you can move this, but, if you can move it, it was incredible. So we didn't believe it at first. So we went back to the family and we said, it's not possible. So he took us to his house, which is 600 years old, and he started removing a block of wood, a block of piece, and he said, it's all concrete now, but at one point, the entire town could be moved, right? And yeah, and I told my colleagues that it would be great to make a video of this, it would be perfect, but we can't, and it's all concrete now because they want to preserve it. But so we don't know for sure, but we kept it open-ended in the story as well. That we kept it like, this is what they say, and this is the biggest authority of the village. So we have to take his word for it, but we still aren't sure. So we're going to keep it that way, and you guys can decide. But the idea there's a Lego temple itself was so exciting for us that we had to tell that story.
So the most interesting thing was, we all know about snake boats, right? Even if you're not Malayalis, how many of you know about snake boats? The race, Kerala boat race. It's all over Incredible India, right? It's insane to look at some 100 people row a boat with such religion and such intensity. So, I mean, it's all shown. I mean, when I thought we should do a story about this, I thought maybe not because everybody's seen it. But so then it struck me. I said, who makes these boats? Like what is the story of the boat itself, not just the people on it? How do they make it? How do they make something so gigantic and so aerodynamic that 108 people can row it? So, and definitely India doesn't have an organized boat building sector, or Kerala definitely does not. At least not in the sense that people from cities think of, right? So we went there, and to our surprise that we found a boat which is Nadubangam Chundan. It's a place in Kerala called Champakulam, very close to Alapi. We met this. We went to a workshop where the boat was being made. It's twice the size of this. It's long. It's really, really, really incredibly long. And it's by the side of the backwaters. And 10 people work on it for 1 year. And it's like basically village sport, right? So village, like if we are one village, we come together, pull in money, build a boat. And it costs 1 crore. It costs 1 crore to build one boat. And they have over 40, 50 boats racing at any point in time. So all the Gulf money, we know where that's going right now, right? So
that wasn't part of the...
Yeah, very proud that at least they're using it to keep the tradition alive, right? So we thought, how did it start? How did the boat start? How did it become a sport, right? Then we realized that the root of it is in actually a small village called Aranmula. It's this boat, right? So this boat is incredibly old. I don't know, I think it's twice my age or whatever, beyond my age. So it's essentially used, such kind of technique was used to keep safe to keep the king safe, right? So basically the king would sit in the chariot with his piece of gold, like right out of some movie or whatever, and there would be 100 people rowing the boat for two things. One is for safety, because so that other kingdoms and islands won't come and steal, and the second was for speed, right? If 100 people row it, it's very intimidating, so nobody will come near you and you can also reach faster. That was essentially the beginning of this race, right? And obviously when the kingdom or the whole idea of a king is not more relevant, when Nehru saw this race, and he decided that he'll start a championship, right? I'm glad a politician thinks that way, and I hope more politicians think that way. So he decided that he'll make a championship. It's called Nehru Trophy now, as all of us know. So the first boat that won, he was so excited to see that. So he jumped on the boat and he handed over the trophy to the oarsman, right? And that boat basically instilled the hope that there can be a Kerala boat race, there can be this race, and more people can participate. So it was kind of a godfather boat, a godfather chundan, to say the right thing. So 62 years later, last year, it is being replaced because it had the world record that it's the longest rowing boat ever. It's not anymore, but it was. So we said, that's fascinating. If something so legendary is being replaced, how does it work? We want to see the people who are replacing this boat with another one. When we went there was another untold story waiting. So the lead carpenter who was building that boat was the son of the lead carpenter who made the older boat, right? So it was like so intricate that I had no idea how I'm even going to tell this story, where do I start or where do I end? And there was so many intricacies where, so we were just, aimlessly headless chickens running around. I don't even know Malayalam, neither did Madhu. So half the time we don't know what they're saying or what we are saying. So we're getting vague glimpses of people telling us things, broken English, thankfully Kerala. And one of the guy who was getting the nail into the boat, he said, come here, music. I was like, what? Okay, so I went there and he's like, music. I was like, do you want me to play music? What? He's like, no, music. So he got another guy to sit on the other side of the boat and hit a nail. So I'll play you that sound a little later. So it was basically like music, It was, they believed that every nail that hit the boat should sound like music, should sound like you're respecting the boat because it's not something that you're hurting. So at least if you're hurting, you might as well make music out of it. So it was like, those drums you hear from Kerala, I'll play you and you will not recognize that it's a boat, it's a couple of nails being beaten on each other. Two people next to each other. So I'll probably play the video as well a little later.
Yeah, and Yashas, actually, when we have a discussion about leads that we have before we travel, the team of 8 or 9 people. So when Yashas said, I'm going to do a story on the snake board, I said, everyone knows about the snake board. And this happened after that, so... Thanks.
It's really incredible. So it's not just about what we don't know, what actually is untold, but it's also about what's untold about something that's already told, right? So it's an interesting perspective that we haven't heard of. It's something that we don't know of. The snake boat, the design of the snake boat is actually in the Rig Veda. So in spite of being Muslim, Hindu or Christian, they all come together and build this boat together. That's such a secular thing. It symbolizes what India is, and especially in these kind of times that this religious tolerance is becoming a big issue, big topic that every day we speak about. It's just so amazing to see that, It doesn't matter. What matters is whether I've spent the money from the Gulf and I win, So that's essentially the idea. It's amazing, It's really, really cool. And so the 4 people who keep the direction of the boat are actually symbolizing 4 different Vedas. So it's just insane. Maybe the people who do it now don't even know about it because it's becoming very commercialized. And there were drones this year. When we went to the race this year, there was a helicopter that threw rose petals on us. Then this was very interesting. So we landed up in Kochi. We had no idea about who, where, what, apart from a bunch of really close friends, Rishabh and who had given us leads about, check this out and check that out. So we were just aiming around, going and speaking to people. And then we saw this board that says Cochin Armory, right? And I'm very fascinated by guns, although I'm really scared of them. I don't like them at all. But I'm very fascinated by people who are passionate about it, right? So we thought we'll go there. And Madhu was like, it's just an armory. Why go there? It's in the middle of the city in MG Road. So I'm pretty sure there's no story. So they said, I said, okay, maybe, yeah, sure. So we were eating and we had nothing to do one day because we didn't have any stories. So we're like, okay, let's go check it out, right? If not nothing, we'll just get a bunch of good pictures for Instagram and artsy photos of people who work there. So we went and we met this man. He kind of he kind of blew my mind out. He's been working in that armory for 23 years, and it's a depository where people leave their old rifles while their licenses get renewed. Right? So basically they have, I think, around 300, 400 old rifles, really, really vintage rifles, and he knows all of them by the back of his hand, and just by how it sounds. Like, he knows exactly which gun has moved, which rifle has moved when it makes a sound. When somebody's moved it, he's like, get that out of the way. So that's how incredible he is. And it was a really interesting conversation about guns, and we had, and especially I wanted to take this angle of our guns. Should guns be legal for public or not? Because we hear this conversation in the US that's happening, and it's going across the world. Israel is planning to give a gun to every citizen of its own. So I wanted to know about that. He said, if you're banning guns, why not ban knives? It's not about what instrument you're using. I could use this remote to hurt you and kill you right now. I mean, that was his version of it. And of course, there is a larger social structure about guns and stuff. But it was really interesting to see his perspective, because he was so close to the topic and so passionate about it. Just like all of us, we all have our passions. We are all biased in some or the other way about some things. I'm very passionate about design, so I'm very biased about anything that's bad design or bad thing. I do not like it. Right? So it's the same with all of us, right? So I think it's really nice to know that. So we thought that's an interesting story to tell, so we did.
And the idea behind that, what he touched upon a little bit, was that he might have had opinions that a lot of us might not agree upon, like the gun thing, for example. But we want to remain unbiased when we tell our stories. So a lot of these characters are very strong characters, they're very strong personalities who believe in a lot of strong things. But, they say things, with a lot of passion, with a lot of conviction. And a lot of the times we may not agree upon it. Sometimes they might touch upon being controversial. But when we tell the story, if we are compelled to tell the story, we tell that as it is, right? We want to tell it. We don't want to be biased by our own perceptions. For example, guns, I may not agree upon guns. Yashas might to an extent. But we don't want to put that imprint. We want to say what he says. And we want to keep it open enough for you guys to decide. I say we're unbiased, but I'm sort of biased to modern-day Indian history, right? So especially the British rule and the implications of that is something that fascinates me. So we went to Kolkata, and I went to Kolkata for that particular reason. I went to see, what the implication of British history was. And I found a family who is the first family across the colonial world, the British colonial world, to actually legally pursue a case against the British and win, right? So it's a fascinating story about how the founding fathers of Kolkata. So these are zamindars who owned Kolkata. One of the three villages one was Kolkata, and the modern day story is that British historians have distorted history to a point where they say that Kolkata was bought, but it wasn't. It was leased for a measly sum of 1,300 rupees back then, 400 years ago. So when I asked him that, but isn't 1,300 rupees a lot of money? He said, bullshit. He attacked me personally. And he said that we used to earn 2 lakh per annum at that time, which is insane, right? So and the interesting part of this story was that he was strongly opinionated. He was really, he had a lot of conviction, probably the most conviction I've seen anyone from our stories. So I went and asked him, what do you think about this? And for 3 hours later, he's still going on. Right? It was a rant. It was a beautiful, brilliant, erratic, crazy rant. Right? And he just went on, and we were just there, and we would try to lift our cups to drink tea, and he would just raise his voice suddenly, and we would keep it down. It was just sort of a chess game that we were going to lose completely, and we lost. Right? And these are the original documents of the signing. And he has such a strong opinion that, imagine that. 2002, they won a case against the British government. I mean, they won a case where they have the right to say that Kolkata wasn't founded by, wasn't founded by a Britisher. It wasn't founded in this particular year. It was a village far before you guys came about, right? And so it was very interesting to write the story, because I thought of many ways to write it, but then I realized that I experienced it as a rant, as a beautiful rant, and the whole story is one big quote, basically. So it's one massive quote where he's just going, hi, and that's it. It just goes on. He goes on about what he feels, what he believes, why is this so, and why what do you think is wrong, even though I didn't say much, But he went on, and that sort of belief was something that maybe biased when someone reads it, maybe like, okay, some of it is incorrect, and Bengalis being sort of a debative nature, we got a lot of response after this. So a lot of them came and said, but we've heard about this, but is this true, is this untrue? And I got a lot of friend requests for just to, argue against me. A lot of people said, okay, and as soon as I accepted it, immediately the chat started, say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? I know about this, but this is not true. And it just went on. The conversation went on, which was very interesting. But I had to maintain that I had to keep it from his perspective. He is my story. This family is my story. And this is what he believes in, this is the conviction, this is his story, and I want to say it that way. And then, of course, we can agree and disagree, and we can dig a little deeper, and all of that. But as far as I go, I want to keep it unbiased. And, so that was Family Against an Empire.
Yeah, we get a lot of messages from people like us, like previous selves, saying, okay, is this journalistic standard, is that standard, is it right to put a 400 quote as your article? Frankly, we don't know. We have no idea. We just want to tell it the way that we experienced it. We don't know if it's the correct format, what is even correct anyway. So it's not like journalism with all this. We're seeing where it's gone right now. It's just incredibly bad. And the state of affairs of how journalism, apart from a few handful of sources who are doing incredibly well, just like, magazines like Caravan, just incredible stuff.
Great magazine.
Great magazine, just like, that's how current affairs should be shown, that's how stories should be told. Now that's a story, right? We look up to them and how they do things. We hope more people like that come out and inspire all of us to pursue stories very unbiasedly, empathetically, and all these things that we've been talking about. One of our friends asked us, why is everything on Untold so intense? So it kind of struck a chord. It's actually not intense. It just happens to be the story. That's it. And then I said, wait for a week, and we released a story called Millet Love. And Millet Love it's a very cute story. It's about this 75-year-old couple who traveled from Tibet during the whatever situation that's happening in Tibet. They took a long journey from Dharamsala to Bailakupi. Bailakupi is the world's largest Tibetan refugee colony. It also happens to be the world's richest refugee colony. So you'll find Buddhist monks and iPads and Mercedes Benz. It's really cool. In the midst of all that, we found this couple who. This woman, she's very authoritative. She's like, she's like the boss of the family. She's a grandma, and she literally keeps him in check. When you see the video, you'll see how bossy she is. It's really cute to see how this thing is. And she makes something called the ragi beer, right? So it used to be barley and Tibetan ingredients, but because she didn't have money and it was locally available in Karnataka, so she made beer out of ragi. And she's like, do you want to try? We said, of course. We're in a place filled with 6,000 monks. Let's try some beer. So I had it and 4 sips and I was gone. I was literally stammering, and I was like, okay, what is the story behind this? So essentially, it's really potent stuff, and she drinks it every day with him. Both of them drink. Every evening they sit together and she makes this and they drink every single day, and they get drunk and go to bed. It's like, wow, that's it. That's essentially the story. So it's kind of a recipe story about how she makes the beer, a millet beer. And eventually that's told in a way that's like a love story of these two guys and the conversations they have. And that also is an untold story. We did a nice illustration of how the recipe is done. So you can go and make your own millet beer if you want. Just go to the story. There's a nice, so you can download it. You guys would know how frustrated we would get every time we see a disgusting logo or a disgusting design or a badly designed website, especially when we see that design or presentation is so accessible today. You can just get online and buy yourself a nice template. How difficult is that to make a good looking website? Yeah? Why is it so difficult? Why is it like such a habit to make ugly things for us, and such respected content? You put in so much work into the content and you just put it in a template that looks like everything else. So we thought, what can we do about it? There are certain restrictions in terms of the web where certain templates have to be followed, but there are stories that deserve a lot more than templates. And we thought, what are these stories and can we present them differently? And we do it all of us in advertising do it for brands all the time. We take a product and we glorify it. We make beautiful designs with it, microsites and that, this and that. It's an experiential site and interactive video, that and this. We thought, why not use that kind of formats for storytelling? This is, again, in Aranmula, while we were discovering that boat, one of my really dear friend, he told me about this mirror. So it's a mirror of only of its kind in the world, which has no glass or mercury. right? So it's made of a ratio of tin and copper, right? And it's a 1,000-year-old tradition. The most interesting part is if you look in the mirror and if you touch the mirror, there's a gap between you and the reflection. In regular mirrors, it has no gap. So it's considered to be the most purest reflection of you. So we met our guide was the most incredible person. He's like a 75-year-old man. The first thing he saw, and he met me, and he's like, what do you want from life? I was like, whoa, don't you want my name first? Like, he's like, he just went for it, and he was a 75-year-old guy who eats like a little bit of rice every day. He's so active, he could beat us in a 100-meter sprint any day, right? And he took us to this old palace called Perenjali Palace, where these two royal brothers live. And the story goes that 1,000 years ago, when the artisans and the blacksmiths from Tamil Nadu came to construct the temple in Aranmula, they took 10 years and they were asked to leave by the king. They said, okay, now you're done with building, why don't you go back to where you came from? Typical migrant crisis, right? So the blacksmiths said, okay, no, it's been 10 years, it's our home, so we want to stay here, everything. And while that argument was happening, apparently this is the story again. So it's written like a fable. It's like a fairy tale that your mom or any of you would read online or hear. So there was the Parthasarathi, who's the god of the temple, apparently appeared in one of the women's dream, and he told her about a ratio. Very scientific god, so ratio, and then he asked her to go try it out. And so she went to her brother, who was a chief blacksmith, and so he tried something and it became a mirror. It became a reflective surface. So he said, okay, this is interesting. So he made a really nice presentation out of it. That's like what we are trying to do, this golden with gold and diamonds and everything, and he gifted it to the king. So the king was so impressed. I mean, mirrors weren't that common 1,000 years ago in India. So he was so impressed that he said, okay, why don't you do this? Why don't you stay in our village, teach people, and all your families just make this mirror. We'll make this popular. And he not only did give them home, but he made Aranmula Kannadi a very important part of Kerala culture. So it's given as a lucky charm to people. And if you dig in any Malayali's house at relatives, there will be some Aranmula Kannadi somewhere, even if they don't know about it. So we did a story. It's a completely interactive website about the relation between these two royal families, royal men, and the relation between the mirror. And these guys were just incredible for photographs. So he was all over us. He would open up secret doors, and he would bring us some instruments that he'd left by. So that's, in terms of unusual presentation, you wouldn't expect that on a story. You wouldn't expect that to have a completely interactive, experiential fairy tale of sorts, right? Of a god giving a widow a ratio to make some mirror. It's really strange.
No, and the interesting part is that, so this story is around 7 months in the making? 7 months in the making, right? So any publication would say that's death, right? You wouldn't take 7 months to make something like that. And that's how compelled we were as designers, as Yashas is a designer as well. So he wanted to make it showcase how he felt through design. And even though it took him like 4 or 5 days to write the story or to experience the story, it took them 8 months, him and another designer called Deepu, to actually make this. And it's a beautiful representation of what the story is, and it also tells you about how much time we take to do each story.
The reason it took so long was not because it takes so long to make it, because it takes so long to figure it out. It took us a while for me to understand how I want to present it. It took a while for Deepu to understand how he wants to present it in a beautiful manner. It took a while for Tom, who's the guy who coded it, to understand how his speciality can bring about more interactive experiences. So it's the reason we call Untold a collective is because of this embodied nature, that we are all different people with different skill sets, but we are focused on making the story better for the person to read, right? So we see these kind of examples out there. I mean, Pitchfork does it, Vice does it, Motherboard does it. They do experiential stories, New York Times does it. But why not here? Why not India? We always look at them and say, oh wow, this is beautiful. It's beautiful here as well if somebody does it. In our defense, it does take a lot of effort. It does take a lot of time and effort to do it. So that's where probably a lot of people filter out saying, okay, I don't want to do this. But if you try really hard, you can actually make it.
Yeah, so this is written by another colleague of ours called Pankaj. So he interned at the Snow Leopard Conservancy in Ladakh for 2 months. for 2 years. I mean, he went a month, 1 year, came back the next year. He's going back there now to install lights for villages so that the snow leopard doesn't attack the villages for their cattle. So he went there and he interned with them and he had an experience with them, and it was, it sort of became an untold story because after him, he just looked at them work. So it was a larger story than just spotting a snow leopard. It was more about the people who dedicate their entire lives for an animal that is fast disappearing, right? So it was amazing as to how he saw the story, and he said, this is not so different from our 9-to-5s. We do the same thing. They come at 9 sharp, and not sharp, maybe 9:30, but they come at around 9 sometime, and they work through the day. They do their paperwork. They do whatever. They have their same issues. Bosses make them work longer sometimes. No lunch breaks, whatever. The same thing, but they are doing so much justice to the time that they're working, and they're doing it for such a larger cause. And when we saw this story, and we decided that we needed to show it in a way which sort of represents how time goes. So if you go through the story, you can see the white background now. So that's 9 o'clock. So as you keep going down, scrolling down the story itself, every time it's a timeline. So you see 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. Once it starts hitting 3 o'clock, it starts getting a little brownish. It starts getting a little darker. And by the time you reach 9 or 7 o'clock, it's dark, right? So it's sort of the representation when you read it about how time's going by for these guys, as to how Pankaj experienced it in the first place. So he just took a back seat, and he looked at them work from 9 to 5. And the challenge was that not just to write the story or take a video, but to actually show them, to put a design element to it so that we can make the who is reading it experience time in a very simplistic way, but ingenious way, I thought it was. And that's why we want to make design also play a large part into what we do.
So when Pankaj came back to us and he told us about this story and the content he had. By the way, the content on this, so all the pictures and video were all shot by the Snow Leopard Conservancy. So the story is actually a collaboration with the organization. So that's a very interesting angle that we thought it could work interestingly as well. So it's really nice to see when Pankaj came back and said, okay, there's a 9-to-5 job, and Tom immediately said, oh, maybe we can make the background change along with the thing. So it's really about interpretation. So when I tell you a story, you interpret it in some other way, you interpret it in some other way. So that's really bringing it together. That's the bigger idea about how unusual the presentation can get. This one really interesting quote from which kind of puts this all together is Phil Kay. He's a great spoken word poet, and he said he has a poem that says every story has a beginning, middle, and the end, not necessarily in that order, right? So we feel that it says a lot about the kind of experiences we have, whether we're on the road. Sometimes the stories start before they end, or they end before they start as well.
Yeah, so I think the takeout is that I'm sure a lot of people ask us as to what the process is, and we have around 25 stories right now on the page, and we've gone after like 75 stories, right? So we've gone after 75 stories. We've got 1/3 of the stories which are compelling, which are there. A lot of dead ends we hit along the way. What we want to say is that it's a lot unsettling, and it's frustrating at times, but it's exciting when we finally unearth after we get unsettled.
Each part of it is very important. I think each format of the story is very important and adds to beginning, middle, or the end. Whether we decide to do video or videos and photos and audio. Like the Halaki story has a 15-second of video. Who does a 15-second of video? But we thought it's better than having nothing, right? Of just them decorating themselves. We thought it's a really nice thing to show. There's a 2-minute audio. There are 15 photos, and there's a good 1,000-word article, right? It's your choice how you want to consume the story, right? And so the choice should be the audience and not the person who's writing it in some way. We rely a lot on local guides. I can speak for Naveed and the rest of the team. It's almost like the local guides are actually the writers. We are not. We're just guys who use English. That's it. It's nothing beyond that. The journey is unsettling. Your journey will be unsettling if you want to do this, or when you travel, all of you will have traveled. You don't know, unless you're like somebody who plans everything to the T, you don't really know. Even then, travel can really surprise you in a way that none of your plans will work out, right? And it's really about making the best of it. And a lot of the times it's the local transport guys, the taxi drivers and auto rickshaw drivers from across the country. You will not believe how incredibly filled with stories these guys are. We give them a lot of flack, but just speak to them, and they know the place by the back of their hand and the people by the back of the hand, and they will tell you things that will blow your mind away, and we kind of we love taxi drivers when we go, just get in a taxi and start bombarding him with questions. He's like, what, where do you want to go first? And I'm like, doesn't matter, just tell us what you know.
Yeah, and that's the imprint we want to keep as well. So when we write a story, or anyone who collaborates to write a story, we want to keep it in their voice. If it's a designer, if it's a photographer, if it's a writer, we want to keep it in their voice rather than edit them to a certain degree. We just say, okay, this is what Untold is, this is what we want to do, this is our premise, and this is our tone to an extent, but we want your voice. We want you to, so the collaborations we've had, we've let it be to a massive degree, as opposed to what we have done in the past, where we edit every word, in other fields, in advertising and things like that. But in this, we want to keep it really open so that the collective's voice comes out. So it's not just Yashas who's writing all these articles, but it's a lot of other people who come on board, and their voices are heard, and their interpretations are heard, and their emotions are heard. So that's what we want to keep emphasizing on.
That's why we made sure even in the design, when you scroll down any story, there's a section dedicated to contributors, not just a guy who writes it, but so we call everybody who's part of the story authors, right? So you could be a design author, you could be a tech author, you could be a photo author or a video author, but we are all authors together, because it's not one thing is more important than the other. That's how we look at it. So the film is as important as the words, and the photo is as important as the audio. So it's essentially about endurance. It all comes down to that. So how much are you willing to give to get? And more often than not, it takes a lot of effort, and after a point, it becomes a habit. And that's the most beautiful part of the whole thing.
So Uncharted is something that we're really excited about. So right now, as we speak, there are two of our colleagues who are in a cave in Ladakh, in the region of Ladakh. This cave has never been explored before. Right, so it's near a village that has a tradition of going into the cave a little bit deeper every other time. So it's like an initiation for the young. So when they come of age, if it's a young girl, young boy, they take them to this little bit deeper into the cave, right? So that they are aware of all the dangers that come by it. They're aware of all the spiritual dangers, as they call it, that come after going inside, but still they keep going further and further inside. So right now, two of our colleagues, Pankaj and Shakti, are actually trying to go the entire way with the village. And but the only condition is that they have to act young, is what the locals have said, because it's a tradition for the young. So they have to showcase a young curiosity or a silliness, otherwise they won't allow them inside. That's the only condition. But they're very excited. They kept calling these guys, and I think right now they're entering the cave sometime very dramatically. I'm saying that, but they're right about now they're going to go and hopefully be the first people to actually do the entire way into the cave. So when you say Uncharted, I mean, yeah, some of it is physical as well, but this is something we're really excited about, not just for Pankaj and Shakti and Untold, but for the village as well, because the village is so curious about what's on the other side. How far does this go? Because every year for the past how many ever years they've been going a little bit more inside, and so they're very excited to actually go the entire way, and for as Untold to be able to enable that to an extent, hopefully it becomes a success, but to enable that is really exciting, and it's uncharted territory for us. So it's not just about finding something interesting and writing a story, but to go a little bit beyond that, go a lot beyond that actually, and to empower a village, to sort of give them what they've always wanted and things like that. So that makes us really excited. So that for us is uncharted territory.
It's structurally unstructured because we want to keep it that way. So it's not a magazine where it's there's an editor and there is the junior writers and sub-editors fighting for stories and whatever. It doesn't matter. So we all do things together. It's a collective, by the true sense that word gets around too much these days. But in the truly sense, we wanted to be that. And that's the reason the kind of stories that you see are what they are, because everybody owns them in their own way, right? So we want to discover the world. We want to expand demographically, whether it's India or Southeast Asia. I mean, collaborations are dime a dozen, right? So Untold Stories are everywhere. I'm pretty sure all of you have a story for us to take as well. So that's essentially what we have to say.